I don't think the bad guys should be able to do all the things that the players can. Some people in the tabletop RPG community hold the belief that if you can do something, the bad guys can too. Everything that's at your disposal is also at their disposal. I think this idea is mostly rooted in creating a symmetrical game so that things are fair. If you can do it and the bad guys can do it, then it's an even playing field, everybody has the same move list, and things are fair. It's symmetrical. Competitive games usually need to be symmetrical. It aids in keeping the game balanced, and balance is important for maintaining competitive integrity. That's why a lot of popular PvP games are symmetrical, or at the very least, super close to being symmetrical. I could go on a whole giant rant about how a lot of games that seem symmetrical aren't quite symmetrical, but that's for another video. Point is, a lot of PvP games are symmetrical. Even inside a competitive environment, though, things being well balanced doesn't always lead to them being entertaining. For a hyperbolic example, which I love using to get my point across because it's hard to argue against things that are extremely exaggerated, you can take the game tic-tac-toe. It's fully fair, a fully even game, and a fully boring piece of shit where everyone ties every single time. Fair does not equal fun. Fair can be absolutely necessary, and things being fair does not fight against fun. Things can absolutely be fair and fun, but things being fair doesn't make them fun. D&D is not a competitive game. It doesn't have the same need to create an even playing field. Things don't have to be fair because only one side is being controlled by players. A lot of single-player or co-op games lean into this to make really varied encounters. They make the bad guys and good guys completely different and make it something very asymmetrical. And D&D is already built to be very, very asymmetrical as it is. From the very basic concept of the players are stuck to only having their character sheets, and the DM gets to be a god king who can do literally whatever they want. Okay, that's a pretty bad faith argument. I'm using extreme hyperbole again and making a ridiculous exaggeration, so let me get into something a bit more grounded. We'll get into the monster manual. Let's see what kind of creatures we have in here. Here I've bumped into the Merilith, which gets to make one reaction on every turn in combat, and also it makes 7 attacks each turn. Mimics are super sticky. They're like glue creatures who can disguise themselves as whatever the fuck. Immutable form, being immune to spells or effects that would alter your form. Here's a creature with at-will spells. The Rakshasa just can't be affected or detected by spells 6th level or lower. You can't even look at a Medusa without possibly being turned to stone. Another creature with at-will spells, the Marid. The Zorn just burrows its way through all stone or earth with no problems. Legendary actions, tons of creatures have those. Layer actions, both of those entire concepts. And this is all just the stuff out of one of the published books, let alone all the other ones and homebrew. I know I homebrew almost every monster, even when I take them from a piece of work. I usually tweak them a little bit. If the monsters get an endless list of unique abilities that they have that the players don't, why can't the players have a handful of things that only they get? Players are the highlight of the game. Making them feel fun and cool is the point of D&D. At least that's the point of the game for me when I'm running games. I don't know, maybe if you run D&D more like it's a combat sim and you really like getting into the nitty-gritty gameplay and you like playing with the monsters, then, you'll see things differently than me, and that's fine. I run super narrative games, stuff similar to Dimension 20, Critical Role, those kinds of shows and stuff. But even still, I do think there can be some fun in asymmetry, even if you run games differently than me. So please stick around and, boost my engagement. Asymmetry in game design can lead to things being more fun sometimes. For instance, take all of those various mechanics, and D&D has plenty of these, that are fun to play with, but not fun to play against. If the primary point of your D&D game is to make sure everybody at the table is having fun, I personally think it's fine for effects like this to exist within the game, but they should only ever be in the player's hands. I rarely, and I mean rarely nowadays, use effects like stunned or paralyzed on players because, well, quite frankly, having your turn skipped isn't any fucking fun, and it can really make people frustrated. So I will take those sorts of mechanics off of monsters and trade them in for some less harsh, more engaging debuffs. But personally, I don't care anymore if one of my monsters gets stunned or paralyzed. That just means we get to the player's turns faster. And quite frankly, I already do things to speed up combat in order to let the players play more. And I know having a bad guy get stunned, especially when you worked on him for so long and just first turn he's paralyzed and then they just wail on him and he dies so fast. it sucks. And it can suck for players too, because usually you want like a boss fight to be challenging and engaging, and you don't want constant cakewalks. Cakewalks can be fun sometimes. Easy fights are good, occasionally, but not all the time. If players can do stuff like stun monsters, I just avoid running encounters that only have one creature, because I don't want things to end up being anticlimactic because a player succeeds at an ability they have. I want my players to be using the skills on their sheets. I want them to be successful with them, because that's what their character is designed to do. Since we're already basically on the topic of Stunning Strike, let's talk about how certain things are designed to be played with, but not against. Just like how certain monster abilities are designed to be played against, and you would never, ever want to put them into the player's hands, there are some things, like the infamous monk ability, you don't really want to take out of the player's hands either. The rogue's sneak attack is another pretty good example because it creates this sub-game within D&D combat of you trying to figure out which character you want to sneak attack and how you can kind of get advantage on them or exploit situations in your favor to get that extra damage. But this is a fully uninteresting mechanic to play against. Pretty much all of the decisions for sneak attack come down to the person who has the ability. There are very few ways to play against it. And the handful that are come down to like, hey, don't stand adjacent to that creature's allies, and cross your fingers that nobody ends up walking up to you and they don't just get advantage some other way. It's not super engaging. Hell, the very act of reusing mechanics can sometimes be not super engaging. I am sorry, but I personally don't think it's interesting. If we finally get to fight your big, evil, bad, master stealthy assassin, and we find out that his main combat encounter trick is that he gets to use sneak attack. Ooh, an extra 3d6 on all of his attacks. How fun and engaging. It's really clever because you see, like, he's roguelike, so he gets the rogue ability. Make sure you don't stand next to anybody in the game where half the classes are designed for melee combat. That'll be fun and full of choices. The idea of the bad guys get to do it too can sometimes lead to a lack of character creativity in both PCs and NPCs alike, in which everybody just starts to get typecast to do the same thing. All the sneaky and nimble people get cunning action or something similar. All the strong people get rage or something similar, blah blah, so on and so forth. Sometimes it's really nice to simplify that NPC writing process and take existing mechanics. I totally get it, I've done it in the past. Just not everything should be fully copy and pasted. And you shouldn't do it so much that it kills creativity. I don't think it should come at the cost of making some new exciting mechanics. Creativity is key to fun D&D in my eyes. I think that's very important for it, so don't crush creativity. Speaking of, don't crush your players' creativity. God. Oh, don't do that. This philosophy I have for D&D asymmetry does not end at just like combat mechanics. It definitely goes into storytelling too. Making sure players can do unique things can help make their characters feel unique. Feel like special protagonists who do something different in the world. D&D characters should not be forced into just being one of many. They can be that. Sometimes it's super fitting for the story you want to tell, but it shouldn't be the default. And I have been very guilty of pushing that onto people in the past. Whoops. Why can't an evocation wizard be the only person in the world who's learned how to sculpt their spells around their allies? Why can't a wild magic sorcerer be the only guy around who's struggling to control his magic? Does every single warlock really need to have a tome, a weapon, or a familiar? Is that just like a rule of all divine deals? Like that just comes with warlock powers every fucking time. You gotta pick one. You gotta pick one. Allowing features to help push what makes a character unique in the world can really make that character feel extra special, because you no longer just have something written down in your backstory, you have something tangible. Every single time that wizard sculpts his spells around himself and his allies, that is a reminder, a tangible reminder, a game action occurring of what he's accomplished, how he's special, how he's powerful, and how he's a unique threat on the battlefield. And there are so many world-building opportunities here. So many world-building opportunities! Imagine somebody makes a backstory for a Way of the Shadows monk, for instance, and they make it so that shadow stepping is a unique thing taught only by the people who taught them martial arts. People know it, but a select people. People in a close, tight-knit circle. Now, there's story-building opportunities, threads you can pull. Imagine if the party ever bumped into a martial artist who's jumping between shadows. Now everybody knows that that guy over there somehow, someway, knows your monk player. And now imagine the weight of that moment being completely dropped when you say, oh no, that's just a thing monks can do. Yeah, people who teleport via shadow are just everywhere. You can find them from Shanghai to Toronto. Don't shit on players being creative, even just in general things too. Like if they find a unique way to use a spell, a magic item, or a combat strategy that they've developed, you don't have to knock the wind out of their sails every single time by just letting all the bad guys do it too. We are telling stories, not making NPCs who optimize all of the joy out of the world. But obviously, if you are, you can fucking do that. Like, go to town, dude. I've been leaning into making D&D more asymmetrical than it already is. And I gotta tell you, my games are so much better off for it. So I just wanted to share that with you. It's only been a few years that I've been so staunchly deep into this idea of asymmetrical D&D. And I've just gotten better and better at making encounters, and my players are having more and more fun. They get way more opportunities to feel special in my games. It's just been an absolute boon. I don't want to be misconstrued, though. I'm not saying you can't let the NPCs do what the players do sometimes. Just don't let it be all the damn time, and be conscious of the times that you are letting NPCs do this so that you're not stamping out your players. I also think existing player mechanics are a wonderful jumping off point to make new NPC abilities. I have done this so much. All the time, I will get inspired by a PC ability and make some version of it that's just slightly better tailored for an NPC. And if you don't have a lot of time on your hands to fuck with that kind of shit, using existing mechanics can be a necessary shortcut. It does not make you a bad DM. It might mean you're better at the game than me, because if you can come up with a way to make something like sneak attack a basis for an awesome boss fight, then that's really, really cool, and you should do it. Don't think that you can't. It's not impossible. I just can't personally come up with any good ideas. I think part of the reason that this is something I've started to veer away from is just that I've played this game for 8 years. I've ran this game for 8 years. So I have seen a lot of NPCs with player character abilities, or they're just straight up written with player character sheets. And being autistic about this game, I know a lot of the class abilities and subclasses pretty damn well, so it's very familiar to me. So I might just be getting tired of seeing this. That's very possible. Somebody who's newer to the game and they haven't seen a fighter action surge 10,000 times might actually find it interesting when a bad guy does that. And I used to lean into this for encounter building all the time when I was a newer DM. It never used to bother me. Ripping existing mechanics felt safe and it felt easy since, I hadn't ran the game before. And I wanted to play with all the cool things there were. There were so many cool abilities that I wanted to be able to use. Nowadays, though, I don't really run combat so I can use the cool abilities of the monsters. I run it to create and manipulate tension, to make for interesting stories, and to try to create fun little situations for my players to work through. And since it keeps being useful, I'm gonna keep up this philosophy of asymmetrical D&D. Maybe you'll learn a thing from it too. See ya.